A sea day on a cruise, is there a good reason to avoid them? Today, I've got 6 arguments why a sea day actually is something to avoid when booking a cruise. Up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RealCaribbeanBlog.com. When you begin thinking about the kind of cruise that you want to take, you have to decide if you want one that is really port intensive or one that has a lot of sea days. Depending on what type of traveler you are, you may find sea days be boring, especially if you have 2 or 3 in a row. Some people would rather spend their vacation in a new place every day rather than necessarily lounging on the pool deck with a cocktail in hand. Not that I don't enjoy having a cocktail in hand, but there is something to be said about visiting amazing places, waking up, and being able to explore, getting a taste of these amazing countries and different locales. That is one of the best conveniences of cruising, right? You only have to unpack once to visit numerous places. So why not take advantage of that and do a port-intensive itinerary? Here are 6 reasons I came up with not to book a cruise with a lot of sea days. Number 1, fewer days at sea means more time to explore other places. If you're someone who really values the places you can visit on a cruise ship instead of the ship itself, you're going to want to choose that itinerary with fewer sea days. Plus, visiting multiple places on a cruise is more convenient than doing so on a land-based vacation. You won't have to worry about unpacking and repacking your suitcase or lugging it through multiple train stations and airports. It's amazing when you take a 7-night cruise, you can visit places like Athens, Rhodes, Mykonos, Palermo, Italy, and Valencia and Barcelona, Spain. If you want, you can even find busy itineraries in the Caribbean too, because there's places like San Juan, Puerto Rico. On a 7-night cruise, when you sail out of there, you can visit more exotic destinations than a cruise from Florida. And this includes places like Barbados, St. Lucia, and St. Martin. Of course, one of the major drawbacks is you can't fully immerse yourself in the new culture in a single day. You should think of port-intensive cruises as a way to get a sample, a taste of what each of these places has to offer. That way, you can maybe plan an extended trip back in the future and know what to expect. When I took a cruise to Norway earlier this year, for me, going to as many ports was more important to me than spending an extra sea day on Anthem of the Seas. I was there in Europe because I wanted to get as much of Europe as possible, so I prioritized a cruise that took me on more port days than sea days. The second reason you might want to skip those sea days is it means fewer opportunities to really feel seasick. No matter your itinerary, no sailing is guaranteed to avoid all rough seas. If you're somebody who is worried about feeling seasick during your cruise, booking a port-intensive itinerary is a really good hack for ensuring that there's less opportunity to incur that kind of potential problem right there. Because during the daytime, you'll be ashore exploring new and exciting destinations. Then at night, you'll only be awake for a little bit since you'll want to get back to get a good night's rest to prepare for the next long day in port. Of course, there are other ways to beat seasickness on a cruise, including bringing the right motion sickness medication like Dramamine or Bonine, selecting a cabin in the middle of the ship on a lower deck, and of course, staying hydrated. In short, you shouldn't be afraid of booking a cruise because you're worried about getting seasick. Booking a port-intensive itinerary kills 2 birds with 1 stone, meaning that you'll have less time on board and you'll be able to cross off more places from your bucket list during a single trip. Number 3, less time on board means that you can save money on a cheaper cabin category. Man, one of the biggest debates is what type of cabin should you get, and is it worth it to spend money on a nicer room? Once you have the ship that you're going on selected and the itinerary that you want, you have to decide which Royal Caribbean cruise ship cabin is the best. On a cruise with a lot of sea days, you might feel the need to splurge on a larger cabin with more outdoor space. Cruises with more days in port, however, mean that you won't be in your cabin nearly as much. Rather than spending more money on a balcony or a suite, you can allocate it towards fun excursions in port. All cabins on a Royal Caribbean cruise come with the same basic amenities like a bed, bathroom, safe, television, vanity area, and closet. They're all meant to be a comfortable home away from home. Even if you book an interior room to save a little bit of money, it's not like you'll be able to take that with the passing scenery, of course. You can always find a place to hang out on the top deck while watching the ship pull in and out of port. But the money that you'd be saving by doing an inside cabin versus a balcony, as an example, could save you a lot of money that could be put towards an awesome shore excursion. And when you're visiting these amazing places, whether it's Europe, the Caribbean, Alaska, whatever, it gives you an opportunity to really be able to get to know these places you're visiting and more time doing really fun things. After all, when you get back on board the ship, you're simply going to change, shower, get ready for dinner, and then go to bed. So why invest in a big cabin or a really splashy cabin? Next reason to go for less sea days on your cruise is because you're going to revisit destinations you've already been to. You don't have to stay on board the ship if you've already been to one port of call on your itinerary. On port intensive cruises, especially in places like the Caribbean, you're likely to revisit somewhere you've already been. That isn't a bad thing, though. On your last visit, it's very unlikely that you got to experience everything the port has to offer. This time, you can do something different. If, for instance, you went to Maho Beach on your last cruise to St. Martin, consider doing something a little more active, like ziplining from Pelican Peak or doing an ATV tour. Another reason why sea days should be avoided on a cruise is you don't have to worry about sailing on the newest ship. If you book a cruise on Icon of the Seas or Utopia of the Seas, chances are that the ship is the destination rather than the ports of call. After all, you're booking those ships because of the amazing things on board the ship. Most of the time, the more unique itineraries are offered on smaller ships anyway, simply because not all ports can handle ships as large as Oasis or Symphony of the Seas. On a port-intensive cruise, you're most likely choosing an itinerary over the ship. You won't need all the onboard thrills, as you'll most likely want to enjoy a nice dinner and perhaps a show before heading to bed. When I took my first European cruise, I found myself pretty exhausted by the third day of the sailing. I was on Anthem of the Seas, great ship, but I didn't want to spend too much time waiting for the evening entertainment. Thankfully, I found some good things to do, be able to relax while listening to live music in one of the venues, but that doesn't mean you can't do both, of course. Royal Caribbean sends an Oasis-class ship to Europe every summer, meaning that you can cruise to the Western Mediterranean on one of the largest ships in the world. Another really compelling reason not to do a cruise with a lot of sea days is if you are a seasoned cruiser, somebody who's been there, done that, and you've visited these ports before, you can take advantage of fewer crowds on board. So on sea days, the pool is the place to be, especially on warmer itineraries. When the ship is docked, however, all the onboard amenities tend to be a lot less crowded, as the majority of passengers have either booked shore excursions or are off exploring on their own. So let's say you want to cruise on Oasis of the Seas and don't want to worry about lines for the Perfect Storm water slide, zip line, or flow rider. If you stay on board, at least for a little while during the hours of operation that is, you're more likely to be able to do it again and again and again because most of the other passengers are off the ship. Remember, you've been there, done that. You've been to Cozumel, you've been to St. Martin, and so you've been to these places, don't necessarily feel that compelled perhaps to go do all these amazing things on shore, so you can take advantage of the shorter lines for the cool activities on your ship. On sea days, you're almost guaranteed to have a relatively lengthy wait for these type of attractions on your ship, unless you're one of the first in line, of course. And this is especially true if there are very few sea days during your sailing, because most people will use this time to check these items off their list. You don't have to stay on board the entire day either. Book an early morning tour that gets you back hours before sail away. You'll still be able to take advantage of both exploring a new place and a relatively empty ship. So, sea days, port days, there's compelling reasons to do both, and depending on what your priorities are, especially if you're going to a more exotic locale, if you're traveling to Europe or you're doing a Southern Caribbean cruise and you want to spend more time, the priority for you is to see these places, then a cruise ship sailing with a lot of sea days is probably what you want to avoid. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me on that one, and what's your strategy for picking a cruise? Do you like sea days or do you prefer port days? Let me know in the comments below. While you're below our video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you know we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.